draft agreement for engineering services.
A couple questions were submitted on this, so let me provide you a brief summary. 2014 was the last major project we did when we did the 14 million on the field, the roofs, the tennis courts, all that, all those items. If you remember, early in my career and with that board, we were still dealing with a lot of leftover punch list items and construction concerns from the $55 million project.
And the pool.
And pool. And so just that overall project, so that's something I inherited because that kind of wrapped up right before I started. And so there were a lot of things that we had to work through. And so when we got into this next big construction project, there was a recommendation of the board, I think maybe even Mr. Jeffson, that maybe we hire, not that Franzik couldn't do it and Franzik still remained our general counsel, but that we hire somebody specifically who specializes in construction litigation, construction law, to help review our CM contract, help review CM at risk, all the different things to make sure the district had a little more coverage and protection from liability in the event if anything went wrong. And so that's where we use Mr. Berg. And so the last board meeting when we brought the engineers agreement to the table, there weren't any questions submitted, and I just picked up a little bit of a sense of, maybe not as comfortable reviewing a document like that, right? And so, and in the past, we always had either Mr. Jepson or Mr. Walsh, both of them were attorneys. Mr. Walsh did a lot of construction contracts for his day-to-day job. And so I wanted to make sure that we had a thorough eye on this and provided enough protection for us once again. And not being an expert in that, so I contacted Wes and Ramona and asked about using Mr. Berg again and gave them some of that background, and they thought that was a good idea. And so that's how we came about with using Mr. Berg. We normally, when we get some general contracts information, we'll work with Brian Crowley, who's one of the partners at Franzik. And we tend to work back and forth, but even historically working with Mr. Crowley, the board members in the past, especially Mr. Walsh, would even find some things that Mr. Crowley didn't find and would, be like, hey, that's a good idea, or hey, I didn't think of that. So not having that resource, I thought it'd be better protection for the district to use a construction attorney on the engineer's agreement. As far as Frank Novotny and Associates, the school board had worked with Frank Novotny in the past when we did the intergovernmental agreement with Riverside, North Riverside, and the school district on the building of the bike trail down First Avenue. And so they had done some work and had dealt with the inner workings of the Forest Reserve and the county and the zoo and removal of trees and some things like that. And so what we have been using Frank Novotny and Associates, because we started to talk to them about this project a few years ago, we've been paying them on a time and labor basis to help do staking, help go to the meetings, provide the drawings, designs, and some of those things. So that's how they came about in using this specific engineer for this project. A red line agreement has been exchanged. I put that in there. I think this thing's already changed 3 times. They've been going back and forth with red lines. So what I've asked them is when they think they've reached somewhat of a final agreement, we'll have a sit down between myself, Ms. Smetana, or Dr. Smetana, Mr. Berg, and Novotny and Associates to just make sure we're all on the same page. Originally, the original agreement that I provided you is what they call a design bid build project. The fact that we're working directly with the engineer, we have eliminated some of the architect fees from this project because it's basically the sports fields and then parking and storm detention. So it's really more of an engineering project. So the idea was, I tried to see if Mr. Berg can do something where it was a design and build agreement. I know Mr. Jacobs will kind of maybe be able to, but design and build would then put a little more liability on the engineer. And so Novotny and Associates don't do those types of agreements at this time, and our legal counsel thought that was okay. We are just putting some specific. They are in agreement to put in some more specific language in the design bid build project to make sure there's some additional protections for the district. The fact that we're going back to the drawing board a little bit to try to amend the plan that we thought we had an agreement on, I think this bought us a little more time. This was kind of rising to the front of the agreement, to the front of the agenda in the event that the forest reserve was okay and we were going to have to move some things forward with the county and the board and some of those things. But I think we've been pumped the brakes a little bit, so I'll continue to leave this on the agenda and I'll continue to bring updates to the board as they come in. But I don't see this being ready for approval until probably August. Is that okay?
So just confirming, we've retained Eric Berg already. He's performed work on this agreement.
Yes, ma'am.
And just one quick, I mean, one of the reasons I asked about the engineer is that while, yes, this is, you know, a parking lot is very different than a building or something like that, but the best practices in terms of storm detention, rainwater infiltration, I mean, there's a lot to it. And my question was more like in the process of when this becomes, you know, when they start planning, I think it is very important that we take a look at how is this considered in a holistic, environmentally sound way.
Sure.
That's my main concern.
Okay. And just so everybody is aware, Frank Novotny Associates does a lot of the civil engineering for all of the surrounding municipalities.
Mm.
So they specialize in road construction, storm detention, parking lots, parks and recs. They have done an athletic complex at Riverside High School, and it's similar to what we're trying to pull off. So they have some school experience as well, but their main thing is municipality, IDOT, and those types of projects. So they're very, very familiar with MWRD and the storm mitigation process.
Any thoughts or questions on that? Anybody else?